Hello and welcome to another edition of the Penn State Icers Hockey Report. I'm your host, Steve Penstone. Today we're going to take a look at the Icers games from January and the first weekend in February, starting with a tough weekend at the University of Ohio, as well as conference games against ESCHL foes Robert Morris, Westchester, Delaware, and Rhode Island. Well, the Icers went 5-3 during the month of January. 7 of those 8 games were on the road, so really a 5-3 record, I suppose, not that bad for the Icers, but it certainly could have been a lot better, especially that opening weekend at the University of Ohio. The Icers going to Athens to take on their longtime foes and probably the biggest rival for the Icers, as well as the biggest rivalry in the ACHA between Penn State and Ohio. And it's always tough to win at the Bird Arena. If you've never been there, it is a wild place for hockey, a small ice surface about 15 feet shorter than a standard-sized NHL rink. And Dan Morris, the coach of the Ohio Bobcats, really builds his team to play on that small ice surface. The fans are right on top of the action. It is loud there. So let's take a look at the action as the Icers open 2011 at the Bird Arena in Athens. Always a tough place to play, whether it's Penn State or anybody else taking on the OU Bobcats.
Bobcats with pressure here. Schultz with it. Along the blue line, Osaki with a wrister off the blocker, and they score! Just over 7 minutes gone here in the second. Icers trying to get back on top, and they do! As Tim O'Brien on a great feed from Chris Cerruti ties it up at 1. Bobcats with it in the Icers zone. Loose puck, Polidor tries to chip it to the blue line, can't get it out as Osaki keeps it in. Now Schultz with it, Schultz shot, scores! Schultz springs Pillmore, Pillmore in on goal, puts on the brakes, Pillmore shot, oh what a save by Madrazo as he got a piece of it with the glove. At center ice, poke check by Polidor, and here goes Mike McDonough into the slot off of the post! Pillmore into the Icer zone, he's got Schultz wide open in front, they score! Centered out in front, Rich O'Brien keeps it in at the point. His blast, and that hit somebody in front and went wide. Blake McNichol with a huge save for OU as he robs O'Brien's shot. McNichol to save, they score! O'Brien around behind the Penn State net. O'Brien offside, skating, it goes right to Schultz. To Pillmore, back to Schultz, they score! Cerruti circles at center. Off the skate of Kevin Miller, and Jared Foos is going to ace it with the empty net goal with 46 seconds left.
So the Bobcats sweep the Icers at home, and as a result, Penn State finishes a disappointing 1-3 against their biggest rivals in the ACHA, and a tough way to start off the new semester as well, as the Icers, as I mentioned, looked at 7 of 8 games on the road in the month of January, so it didn't get any easier the following weekend as they headed to Pittsburgh to take on conference foes Robert Morris. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the highlights of that weekend series at the Island Sports Complex. You're watching the Penn State Icers Hockey Report. And welcome back to the Penn State Icers Hockey Report. I'm your host, Steve Penstone. Right now, let's take a look at the highlights of the Icers weekend sweep of the Robert Morris Colonials at the Island Sports Complex in Pittsburgh. The Burger Boys put the Icers on the board midway through the first period. Chris Cerruti is strong on the rush. He finds Mark Polidor. His touch pass to Tim O'Brien. Timmy notches his 20th of the season to put the Icers on the board. 1-0 after 1, but the Icers and Colonials combined for 7 second-period goals. Eric Steinauer with a shorthanded goal on a nice feed from Paul Daly just a minute 36 seconds in. The Colonials respond. Brian Chavetta gets his 18th of the year. He is the all-time leading scorer for Bobby Moe. Dominic Marone restores the 2-goal lead with his 11th of the year. Looks like that might have been a little painful for Marone. Minute later, Zach Stern scores for Bobby Moe on a goalmouth scramble at the side of the net. With the Icers on the power play, Tim O'Brien's shot from the point, tipped by George Sod. George's first power play goal of the year makes it 4-2 Penn State. Then at 16:47 of the second, Tim O'Brien finds the loose puck, tucks it past Phil Salerno for his 100th career goal in an Icers uniform. On to the third now with the Icers up 5-3. Saad with the rush. He undresses the Colonials defenseman and then gets Salerno down and out, tucks it in for his second of the night. After Cam Robichaud scored for Robert Morris, Dom Marone with a coast-to-coast rush. He picks up the power play goal, his second goal of the night, 12th of the year. Later in the game, Rich O'Brien and Robbie Moe's Bo Roeder, they go toe-to-toe, get the early showers. Chris Cerruti adds a second power play goal with a blast from the top of the left wing circle. Chris recorded his 100th career point in this win. And Paul Daly finishes off the scoring, his 8th goal of the year. Danny Ivanier picks up the win as the Icers roll by a score of 9-4. Tim O'Brien gets the Saturday matinee going with his 22nd of the season, but less than a minute later, Brian Chavetta tying things up with his 19th of the year. The teams were knotted up at 1 after 20 minutes. Early in the second with Dan Petrick in the box, Dominic Marone on a breakaway. He beats Phil Salerno for his second shorty of the season. Well, the lead didn't last long. Just 5 seconds after Petrick steps out of the penalty box, Bo Roeder with his 11th of the year to knot it up at 2. Just under 2 minutes later, George Saad breaks down the wing. His shot is stopped by Salerno, but Eric Steinauer's there to clean up the garbage for his 7th of the year. Icers lead at 3-2 after 2. 59 seconds into the third period, Paul Daly with a snapshot from the slot. He makes it a 2-goal lead. Michael Longo sets up Joe Zittarelli in the slot. Joe's 4th of the season adds to the lead for the Icers. And Rich O'Brien with some good work along the boards inside the Robert Morris zone. He finds a wide open Paul Daly. Paul's 2nd of the weekend, 10th of the year, makes it 6-2. And Michael Longo, like what Dominic Marone did on Friday night, he goes end-to-end and finishes the scoring with his 3rd of the year as the Icers rout Robert Morris by a score of 7-2. Well, the 2 wins against the Colonials came on the Olympic-sized ice surface at the Island Sports Complex, and that's important for the Icers because later in the month they'll go to the University of Delaware and take on the Blue Hens on the Olympic-sized ice at the Rust Arena, which is also the site of the 2011 ACHA National Tournament. All right, we'll be right back with more highlights and analysis after the break. You're watching the Penn State Icers Hockey Report.